Imagine a world where the flick of a switch in a basement in Virginia could melt a nuclear centrifuge 6,000 miles away. Imagine a desert where a high-stakes game of chicken between billionaire drones and ancient speedboats happens every single morning. For nearly 50 years, the United States and Iran have been locked in a gray zone war, a conflict fought not with open declarations, but with digital viruses, shadowy proxies, and secret assassinations. From the opulent ballrooms of the Shah to the glowing screens of the Stuxnet virus, this is the story of two nations who used to be best friends, became better enemies, and are now fighting the most sophisticated secret war in human history. Chapter 1: The Golden Era of the Peacock Throne, 1950-1970. Before the burning flags and the shouting crowds, there was a time when Tehran was known as the Paris of the Middle East. In the 1960s, Iran was America's most vital ally in the Persian Gulf. The Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was a man of immense wealth and Western tastes. He flew American fighter jets, shopped in New York, and was the policeman of the Gulf, keeping the oil flowing in the Soviet Union at bay. The U.S. poured billions into Iran. We didn't just give them weapons, we gave them the start of their nuclear program, the Atoms for Peace initiative. It is one of history's greatest ironies. The very nuclear foundations that the U.S. tries to stop today were originally built with American blueprints. Chapter 2: The 1953 Coup, the Original Sin. To understand why the streets of Tehran chant "Death to America," you have to go back to 1953. Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, decided to nationalize Iran's oil, taking it back from the British. The UK and the US, fearing a loss of oil and a tilt toward communism, launched Operation Ajax. The CIA and MI6 orchestrated a coup to overthrow Mossadegh and solidify the Shah's absolute power. It worked, but it left a scar on the Persian psyche. It convinced a generation of Iranians that America was not a shining city on a hill, but a puppeteer pulling the strings of their sovereignty. This original sin would haunt the relationship for the next 70 years. Chapter 3: 1979. The world turns upside down. The pressure cooker finally exploded in 1979. A bearded cleric named Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile, leading a revolution that was part religious fervor and part anti-imperialist rage. The Shah fled, and the Peacock Throne collapsed. Then came the event that defined modern American foreign policy: the hostage crisis. For 444 days, 52 Americans were held captive in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. For the American public, watching the nightly news, Iran became a faceless villain. The failed rescue attempt, Operation Eagle Claw, where U.S. helicopters crashed in the desert, was a low point for American prestige. The alliance was dead. The era of the Great Satan and the Axis of Evil had begun. Chapter 4: The Tanker War and the Praying Mantis. In the 1980s, the war turned literal. As Iran and Iraq fought a brutal 8-year conflict, the U.S. found itself protecting oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. This led to Operation Praying Mantis in 1988, the largest surface naval engagement for the U.S. Navy since World War II. In a single day, the U.S. destroyed half of Iran's operational fleet after a U.S. frigate struck an Iranian mine. But the tragedy of the era was Vincennes. A U.S. cruiser accidentally shot down an Iranian civilian airliner, killing 290 people. The U.S. called it a tragic mistake. Iran called it a deliberate act of terror. The mistrust was now written in blood. Chapter 5: The Digital Battlefield. Enter Stuxnet. As the 2010s arrived, the war moved from the sea to the motherboard. Iran began rapidly expanding its uranium enrichment program at Natanz. The U.S. and Israel knew a conventional bombing would start World War III. So, they used a cyber missile. Stuxnet was the world's first digital weapon, a sophisticated worm that traveled via thumb drive. It bypassed the air-gap security of the Natanz facility. Once inside, it told the centrifuges to spin at irregular speeds until they literally tore themselves apart, all while showing the Iranian technician screens that everything was normal. It was a ghost in the machine, the most effective act of sabotage in history. Iran responded by building one of the most powerful hacking armies in the world, targeting U.S. banks and dams. Chapter 6. The Shadow Commander. Qasem Soleimani. For 2 decades, the face of Iran's defiance was General Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the Quds Force. He was a phantom, moving between Baghdad, Beirut, and Damascus, building a land bridge of proxy militias Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, to surround America's allies. To the U.S. military, he was the man responsible for the IEDs that killed hundreds of American soldiers in Iraq. To Iran, he was a living legend. The Shadow War reached a boiling point on January 3, 2020, when a U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drone fired a Hellfire missile at a convoy in Baghdad. Soleimani was gone. The world held its breath, waiting for a nuclear-level retaliation. It never came, but the Brazen War became even more unpredictable. Chapter 7. The Nuclear Deal and the Great Withdrawal. In 2015, it seemed like the cycle might break. The JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, was signed, intended to trade sanctions relief for a freeze on Iran's nuclear ambitions. For a brief moment, diplomats were talking instead of soldiers. However, in 2018, the U.S. withdrew from the deal, citing Iran's malign behavior and missile programs. Maximum pressure, sanctions returned, crushing the Iranian economy. Iran responded with maximum resistance, increasing its enrichment and seizing oil tankers. We returned to the status quo, a state of permanent tension, where one small mistake in the Strait of Hormuz could ignite a global catastrophe. Chapter 8. The War of the Proxies. Red Sea to Gaza. Today, the USA versus Iran's story isn't fought on the border of either country. It's fought in the Red Sea, where the Iranian-backed Houthis use $2,000 drones to disrupt trillions of dollars in global trade, forcing the U.S. Navy into a high-tech whack-a-mole game. It's fought in the Levant, where the influence of Tehran clashes with U.S. interests daily. Iran has mastered asymmetric warfare. They know they cannot win a head-on fight with the U.S. Air Force, so they fight with thousands of cheap drones, cyber attacks, and local militias. It is a war on 1,000 cuts. Chapter 9. The Future. A Nuclear Threshold. As of 2026, Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than ever before. The breakout time has shrunk from months to days. The U.S. faces a terrifying dilemma: diplomacy, which has failed repeatedly; containment, which is becoming more expensive by the day; conflict, a war that would dwarf the Iraq and Afghan conflicts combined. Chapter 10. The Persian Chessboard: Why It Matters to You. For the American audience, the Iran story is often told in soundbites of bad actors and rogue states. But the reality is a tragic epic of two nations that are mirrors of each other's fears. America fears a nuclear Iran that could dominate the world's energy and threaten its allies. Iran fears an America that wants to repeat the coup of 1953 and erase its identity. The story of the USA versus Iran isn't just about politics. It's about the price of oil, the safety of the internet, and the stability of the modern world. We are living in a time of perpetual crisis, where every day is a move on a chessboard that has no checkmate, only endless moves in the dark. Chapter 11. The Invisible Frontier. The Rise of the Drone Swarm. While the world was fixated on nuclear centrifuges, a quieter revolution was taking place in the workshops of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Iran realized they could never match the US F-35 stealth fighters. Their solution? The Shahed drone. These are not the million-dollar MQ-9 Reapers used by the U.S. They are suicide drones, cheap, loud, and built with off-the-shelf parts. In 2019, a swarm of these drones and cruise missiles bypassed sophisticated Western radar to strike the Abqaiq oil facility in Saudi Arabia. In an instant, 5% of the world's oil supply was knocked offline. This was a message to Washington. We can touch the global economy without firing a single bullet from our own soil. Today, these same drones are a centerpiece of global conflict, proving that, in the new era of warfare, quantity has a quality all its own. Chapter 12, Operation Eagle Claw, the Ghost of Desert One. To understand the deep-seated American military resolve regarding Iran, one must look at the wreckage of Desert One. In 1980, President Jimmy Carter authorized a daring rescue mission to save the 52 embassy hostages. It was a plan of incredible complexity, involving C-130s and Sea Stallion helicopters. But a hullabaloo, a massive, blinding desert dust storm, intervened. Mechanical failures and a tragic collision on the ground left 8 American servicemen dead and the mission in ruins. The images of charred American aircraft in the Iranian desert became a symbol of American weakness that haunted the Pentagon for decades. It led to the creation of SOCOM, Special Operations Command, ensuring that the U.S. would never be that unprepared again. For Iran, Desert One was seen as divine intervention, a narrative they still use to bolster their defiance. Chapter 13, The Strait of Hormuz, the world's jugular vein. Every day, roughly 20% of the world's petroleum passes through a narrow stretch of water only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz. This is the ultimate kill switch.
The U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, based in Bahrain, plays a constant game of cat and mouse with the Iranian Navy's fast attack boats. These small, agile boats are designed for swarming tactics, aiming to overwhelm a massive U.S. destroyer the way 1,000 bees might take down a bear. A single mistake, a stray shot, or a miscalculated maneuver in these crowded waters could trigger an immediate global energy crisis, sending gas prices in the U.S. to levels never seen before. Chapter 14, The Billion-Dollar Hostage Game. The 1979 hostage crisis never truly ended. It just evolved into diplomatic bargaining. Over the last decade, several dual-national Americans have been detained in Iran on murky espionage charges. These individuals often become bargaining chips in high-stakes negotiations over frozen Iranian assets. In 2023, the world watched as 5 Americans were released in exchange for the unfreezing of $6 billion in Iranian oil revenue, restricted to humanitarian use. To critics in the U.S., this is paying ransom and encourages further detentions. To the families, it is the only way to bring their loved ones home. This cycle of hostage diplomacy keeps the two nations in a state of constant, bitter communication. Chapter 15, The New Great Game. Enter China and Russia. The USA versus Iran story is no longer a two-player game. In 2021, Iran and China signed a 25-year strategic partnership, promising hundreds of billions in investment. Simultaneously, the war in Ukraine has brought Tehran and Moscow closer than ever, with Iran supplying the drones that now buzz over Kyiv. Iran is no longer isolated. They are becoming a central node in a new axis of resistance against Western hegemony. For the U.S. audience, this means the Iran problem is now tied to the China problem and the Russia problem. The Persian chessboard has grown to encompass the entire globe. Chapter 16, The People's Cry, Woman, Life, Freedom. Perhaps the most unpredictable variable in this story isn't a missile or a virus, but the Iranian people themselves. The 2022 protests, sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini, showed a generation of young Iranians who were tired of the Great Satan rhetoric and the crushing weight of sanctions. While the U.S. government supports these movements in spirit, they tread carefully. Past history, 1953, has taught Washington that direct interference can backfire, allowing the regime to brand protesters as foreign agents. The future of the Iran-USA relationship might not be decided in the White House or the Kremlin, but on the streets of Tehran and Shiraz. Chapter 17, The Final Countdown, The Threshold. As we stand in 2026, the shadow war is reaching a crescendo. Iran is a threshold nuclear state, meaning they have the knowledge and material to build a bomb if they choose to cross that line. The U.S. policy of maximum pressure has slowed them down, but it hasn't stopped them. The story of the USA and Iran is a tragedy of missed opportunities and historical trauma. It is a story of two proud nations, both convinced of their own exceptionalism, locked in a cycle they cannot seem to break. Whether the next chapter is a breakthrough peace or a catastrophic war remains the most important question for the security of the 21st century. Epilogue: The Eternal Horizon. The Persian chessboard is never truly cleared. Each move, from a 1953 coup to a 2020 drone strike, is etched into the wood of the table. For the American people, Iran represents the ultimate enigma, a civilization of poets and scientists led by a government of hardline clerics. As we move forward, the goal remains the same: to find a way to live in a world where the flick of a switch doesn't lead to the end of it.